and we should now enter the realm of Dragon Rulers. 2013 was a while back, but oh wow.
It was a wild ride.
Yes. I think rarely we have seen the impact of a set and of an archetype of cards just as big as this one. Dragon Rulers introduced a way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! That never happened before, and they rarely even afterwards repeated itself. I'm thinking maybe tier elements along those lines, and the reason is that they allowed you to play not only with your field and with your hand, but also a lot with your graveyard, and for the first time consistently with your banished cards. Dragon Rulers, and here we are featuring their smaller versions that allowed you to essentially special summon them from the deck, were just so consistent. They allowed you to play a lot of different cards, but it was the first time ever where just the engine itself was extremely powerful. You could not only special summon a lot of high attack monsters and try to just rush your opponent down, but you could make XYZs and synchros, so accessing a lot of different extra deck options thanks to their rank 7s, Dragosak being one of them.
Yeah.
The card was incredible, still is played nowadays in Kashtira decks, so you can absolutely get how strong of the card that was. And again, we see cards that just relied about dragons. One of them, Dragon Ravine, meant obviously for the Dragonity decks, still saw a lot of powers because it allowed you to send the Dragon Lures from deck to graveyard and then just still use their effects. But if the format was about special summoning a lot, again, we have mentioned it, Duelist try and will eventually find a solution. And a card that back in the day was only a common that nobody was playing was Vanity Emptiness, arguably one of the strongest common cards of all time, that took the NAWCQ by storm with a complete domination with Vanity Emptiness that eventually began to just being played by a lot of decks. But I think that was not the only way that you could stop your opponent from special summoning, right?
No, we have to, if we're going to talk about Dragon Rulers and their history, we have to talk about one of the greatest triangles of power in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! We had Dragon Rulers, but we also had two other decks that fought alongside it during that format. We had Spellbooks. What a deck. It was the first time, I think, that really a deck was completely about spell cards and just fetching lots of spells from your deck and using them. But the most important one, Spellbook of Judgment. You were able to summon any of your spellcaster monsters from your deck as long as you'd played enough Spellbook cards, and that card was good old Jaugen, which stopped you from special summoning. And the way that the Dragon Rulers dealt with that, you just had to draw the right cards. You had to summon the Dragon Ruler of play the Dragon Ruler of Infernos. What a meta that was. And of course, I would be not doing it justice if we also didn't talk about the third deck, which was Evil Swarm. Both of those decks, both the High Priestess of the Spellbooks, and then of course all of the Dragon Rulers were very high level monsters. And Evil Swarm Ophion said, no, you are not allowed to summon any monsters above level 5. What an amazing format that was. The Dragon Rulers went on to stick around for a couple of more years in various different forms, but I think their original form was for sure the most memorable. So Marcello, most decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Benefit a lot from having tons of cards in their hand, drawing a lot of cards, being able to play a lot of cards, keep lots of resources in their hand. But there was one deck that was able to play with a phantom hand of no cards, and that is Infernity's. All of their cards were supercharged whenever you didn't have any cards in your hand. And we're going to talk first about Infernity Archfiend. If you drew Infernity Archfiend when you had no cards in your hand, you were able to just special summon him right away. And if you special summoned him when you had no cards in your hand, you could go and get any Infernity card from your deck. And there were some great choices. You could get Infernity Launcher, which allowed you to summon 2 of your Infernity monsters from the graveyard. You could get Infernity Barrier, which negated one of your opponent's cards. You could also get Infernity Break, which destroyed one of your opponent's cards. And those were the amazing trap cards, but the version that I want to talk about of Infinities was the Synchro version. So you would use Infernity Beetle, being able to turn 1 Beetle into 2 very quickly, and then Synchro up and up and up into these huge, huge Synchro monsters, and using various different levels of Infernity monsters, it would allow you to summon Shrishula, of course, my favorite. And then it evolved from there.
It did, and I gotta say, although, yeah, it was fun to play around with Infernities and, you know, tuners and synchro monsters. I'm more on the XYZ side for certain reasons, and the deck did evolve into what was a machine, mainly thanks to Lavalval Chain, I gotta say, which obviously is a tremendous card that ended up being forbidden, and that can just send any of your Infernities, as you have mentioned, then bringing them back with Launcher. And what was actually even relevant is that, as you've mentioned, the deck is great at having no cards, which actually makes Archifiend, I think, arguably the best top deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm thinking Bubble Man, but I think Archifiend might have the lead. And funny enough, sometimes you use Lavalval Chain secret second effect, which is that you can just put a monster on top of your deck. And so the deck actually used this combo to just take the Archifiend and put it on the top of your deck, so that next turn you were guaranteed to top deck it and then just go crazy with it. And that, I think, is something completely unique to Yu-Gi-Oh! So I think it was definitely a unique deck, and something that was so powerful that it won the only World Championship held in Italy back in Rimini 2014.
So, Marcello, something that's very dear to my heart and to our shared heart as well is Nekroz. What an amazing deck. The ability to ritual summon in this brand new different way, all of the different mirrors that allowed you to summon these amazing Nekroz ritual monsters that embodied all of the different ice barrier dragons and various other powerful monsters throughout the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was amazing. And I want to tell a little story about this, about me and you. I remember one of the first times we met, we then spent a lot of time playing together, and we practiced and practiced and practiced before YCS Bochum for the Nekroz format. And I remember that we could never agree on whether we should have main deck cards to deal with spells and traps or not. And I was firmly of the opinion that I didn't want to play any spell and trap removal, but you decided to. And I remember that I lost the first 3 rounds of that event, and Marcello got to the top 8. It was a big difference, and I think you made the right choice. But I was happy because I got to commentate for the first ever time during that event.
That's great, and then I guess it was a win-win scenario,
yes,
for sure. But yeah, I totally agree that for me as well, this is just as a special place in my heart. Not only because it was a lot of fun to play the deck, but because it was one of those periods where I think I've met most of the friends I eventually become really close to. You've mentioned our experience, but really a lot of those friends came in that days, and this is such a fun deck to play with. It's one of those that I never get tired of playing. Even today, you bring me a deck to a YCS and you ask me to play a Nekroz mirror match, I will always be down. So if you've never played it, I really suggest you to pick up these cards and give it a try.